Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take that stack of sources you've shared, articles, research, maybe even your notes, and really dig into them.
Yeah, pull out the key ideas, the interesting bits.
Exactly. And today, wow, we're diving into something that really challenges a core belief most of us have about human history. It's this idea that shifting from hunter-gatherers to farmers was just automatically a good thing, a clear step forward.
Right, the big agricultural revolution.
Yeah, that one. So our mission today, using the material you sent us, is to unpack why this huge shift, this thing we celebrate as the foundation of civilization, well, it might have actually been a step backwards for the average person's quality of life.
It's a provocative idea, definitely, based on some fascinating evidence.
Totally. So get ready, because this deep dive might flip some things you thought you knew right on their head.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with the standard story, the one we all kind of learned.
The textbook version?
Right. It goes like this. Humanity starts out as these small bands, maybe 20, 50 people, hunter-gatherers.
Nomadic, moving around, living a bit precariously.
Yeah, uncertain, always looking for the next meal, that kind of picture.
At the mercy of nature.
Then, boom, the agricultural revolution happens. We figure out farming.
Domestication. Control over the food supply. That's the key part of the story.
Control, and crucially, surplus food. More than you need right now.
And that surplus supposedly is what allows everything else to happen.
Exactly. Politics, organized religion, art, cities pop up, writing, literature, science. I mean, everything we think of as civilization.
It's presented as this neat linear path. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Modern world.
The direct road to us, basically. Simple progression.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting based on those sources, that whole narrative, it's being called a mythological narrative.
A myth. That's strong language.
It is. But there's growing archaeological evidence, anthropological studies. They're suggesting this so-called leap forward might actually have been a serious regression in terms of quality of life for most people back then.
A regression. Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge shift in how we might look at our own history. Suggests we've maybe bought into a comforting story, not necessarily the full picture.
Okay, so if it's a myth, or at least partly one, what's the uncomfortable truth then? Why was farming maybe a bad idea? The sources lay out, 4 main arguments?
That's right, 4 core reasons.
The first one, it just hits hard. Harder work, less freedom.
It really cuts against the grain of the progress idea.
Totally. I mean, think about the lives described. Hunter-gatherers, some analyses suggest they worked maybe 1 or 2 hours a day.
It sounds unbelievable now, doesn't it? Just a couple of hours finding food.
Imagine that. And their diet was incredibly varied, nutritious, found with relative ease, foraging, a bit of hunting.
Almost sounds nice compared to the grind.
Doesn't it? But then farming comes along. And what happens to the workday?
It explodes. Farmers were toiling easily 6 to 8+ hours a day. And the work itself, it was hard labor. Repetitive, back-breaking stuff tied completely to the seasons, the weather, the demands of these plants.
Which connects to that really powerful quote from Harari's Sapiens.
Oh, yeah. We didn't domesticate wheat. We domesticated us.
That just flips everything. The idea that we became the servants.
Exactly. It reframes the whole power dynamic. Suddenly, humans are tied down, obligated to these crops, their lives dictated by the needs of wheat or rice or corn.
We domesticated us.
Yeah.
So how did that play out? I mean, beyond just the long hours, was it like people knew they were signing up for a harder life?
Probably not consciously, no. It likely happened gradually, generation by generation. Maybe a little more food security one year felt worth it, you know?
Short-term gain.
Exactly. But the commitment was huge. Once you plant that field, you're stuck. You have to tend it, guard it, harvest it. You can't just wander off.
Right. You're tied to that patch of land.
And that need to stay put and to work the land more intensely.
Well, it leads directly to the next big issue, doesn't it? Needing more hands.
Argument 2. Overpopulation and environmental damage. You needed more kids for farm labor.
Seems logical, right? More hands make lighter work, or at least more total work possible.
But the knock-on effect.
Well, it triggered this huge population boom. More people than the land could really sustain long-term with those early farming methods.
So too many mouths to feed eventually.
And too much pressure on the environment. They started over-farming. That led to soil exhaustion, land degradation, basically turning good farmland into wasteland surprisingly fast.
Wow.
And we see evidence of early agricultural societies collapsing because of these very environmental pressures they created.
So the progress kind of sowed the seeds of its own destruction, in a way.
In many cases, yes. It raises that question again. If it leads to collapse, how much of a leap forward was it really? It's a stark reality check for sure. Okay, and speaking of stark, argument 3. This one surprised me. Worse health and nutrition.
Yeah, this is really counterintuitive to the idea of having a stable food supply.
The sources talk about skeletal remains, right?
Yeah.
And they show hunter-gatherers were actually taller.
And healthier.
Consistently. The bones tell a story. Hunter-gatherers had these incredibly rich, varied diets.
Right, you said meats, nuts, fruits, all sorts of different plants, whatever was available.
A wide nutritional base. Now, contrast that with early farmers.
They were relying heavily on just one or two staple crops, weren't they? Like wheat.
Exactly. Monocultures.
Yeah.
All your nutritional eggs in one basket. And often, that basket wasn't actually as nutrient-dense as the wild stuff hunter-gatherers ate.
So less variety, maybe fewer essential vitamins and minerals?
Which naturally led to poor nutrition overall. You see evidence in the skeletons. Stunted growth, more signs of disease, dental problems. It makes sense why they were generally less healthy. Okay, so you've got people working harder, they're maybe not eating as well, and they're starting to live closer together.
Ah, you're leading right into argument 4. Disease and poor sanitation.
It seems like the inevitable next step, sadly.
Yeah.
Farms mean domesticated animals, right?
Yeah. And those animals living cheek by jowl with humans brought a whole host of new disease vectors.
Like what? Parasites, viruses?
Exactly. Think about pigs, chickens, cattle living right there. They carry diseases that can jump to humans. Things hunter-gatherers living in smaller, mobile groups wouldn't have encountered nearly as much.
Yes. And then there's the settlement issue itself. Lots of people in one place.
With basically zero waste management, no sewers, no real garbage disposal.
Okay.
These early settlements became, frankly, breeding grounds for disease.
So you get epidemics.
Exactly. Widespread, devastating epidemics, a kind of health threat that was pretty much unknown to scattered hunter-gatherer bands who could just move away from waste and didn't live in such dense concentrations. It's a grim picture.
No kidding. Harder work, worse food, more disease. It's not sounding like progress.
And if you pull back from the specifics, you see the bigger philosophical point the sources are making.
Which is?
That our traditional story just assumes civilization is inherently progressive. That every step, foraging, farming, cities, tech, is automatically better.
Right, it's just taken as a given.
But this evidence, this perspective, it completely flips that script.
Yeah.
It forces you, the listener, to really question those fundamental assumptions about what progress even means.
So the sources actually pose these big questions, don't they? Like, what do we lose in the name of progress?
Deep questions.
And was civilization a trap set by our own success? That one really makes you think.
It does. Or even, are we living better lives now or just more complicated ones?
Yeah, those are not easy questions.
And what's key here is defining that farming transition not just as, a clever new technique.
Like inventing a better tool.
Right, but seeing it as a massive biological and existential gamble, a fundamental shift in our species' entire way of being.
A gamble. Wow.
A gamble on our relationship with the planet, with our bodies, with each other. And the sources argue pretty strongly that for the average person back then, it didn't necessarily pay off in terms of things like health or freedom or, frankly, happiness.
Okay, there's this analogy the sources use that really crystallized it for me. The teaching moment one.
Ah, the Trojan horse.
Yeah. Think of this like the Trojan horse. Explain that.
Well, farming, on the outside, it looked like a gift, didn't it? A solution to the supposed chaos and uncertainty of hunting and gathering.
Stability, maybe even abundance, seems great.
Exactly. But inside that attractive package, hidden away, were all these negative consequences we've been talking about.
Like what was inside the horse?
Like a form of labor slavery, not necessarily to other people, but to the plants themselves, like increased mortality rates, widespread poor health, and serious environmental damage.
All hidden inside the gift of agriculture.
Precisely. And so the conclusion, using that analogy, is pretty blunt.
Wheat won, humans lost.
It's stark, but that's the argument. Wheat spread across the globe, thrived, multiplied.
While humans worked harder, got sicker, and maybe weren't even happier.
That's the provocative takeaway.
So there it is. Our deep dive into this really challenging idea that this cornerstone moment of human history, the one we usually celebrate, might actually have been a major step backward for humanity's well-being.
It definitely forces a reevaluation.
It really does.
And maybe it leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on. Something beyond just ancient history.
Okay.
If our very first big steps towards what we call civilization had these kinds of hidden serious costs, what other things we currently label as progress in our modern world might need a closer look? What other benefits might have hidden downsides we're not fully acknowledging?
What does progress really mean, beyond just more tech or more complexity?
Exactly. What are we optimizing for?
That's a lot, yeah. That's a lot to think about. Definitely food for thought.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And thank you for sending in the sources that sparked this whole conversation. It was really fascinating.
Absolutely.
Keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep sending us great stuff to dive into.